Have you ever been in a cave? A big, dark cave? Hi kids, this is Auntie Mila. Have you ever been in a cave? A big dark cave? Yeah, you have to take a flashlight. Well, our verse today is Psalm 119, verse 58. And it says, with all my heart, I want your blessings. Yes, I want God's blessings. I want His blessings everywhere. I was out in the garden yesterday, and I was walking through our little farmyard, and look what I found. I found a beautiful white feather. This is a blessing. I thought, oh, that's so pretty, and I picked it up. And then I found another one, and it's really fluffy and fuzzy. Look. Oh, and it is so soft you can hardly feel it. Well, this is a blessing. Yes. This is a real blessing. I thought you'd like to see them. Our story today is about Paul, Cindy, and their friend. I'll tell you about their friend. Now, Paul lived in a big city, and he got sick, and it just seems like he just couldn't get well. And the doctor said, well, you know, I think you should get him into the country. I think that would help him get well. And Mom and Dad thought, oh, we live in the city. What are we going to do? And they said, well, I know, we can send him to my sister and her husband. They live on a farm in Montana, the beautiful state of Montana. And so they wrote and asked, can Paul come and visit you for a few weeks? He's just sick and he just can't get well. And they wrote back, oh, we would love to have Paul. And they said, well, good. So Mom packed his suitcase, and he didn't know about that. He was 13. He didn't know about that, but he knew his aunt and uncle were really nice people, and they had a daughter, his cousin, about his age. So we thought, well, maybe it will be okay. So they packed his suitcase, and they took him to the train. They said, bye, and they gave him a big hug and a big kiss. He got on the train, and he rode and rode and rode. Finally got there, and he got his things, and he started walking down the steps, and he recognized his aunt and uncle. They came running up to him, Paul, and they gave him a big hug. And then there was his cousin, Cindy, about his age, and she said hi, and he said hi. And they went and took them, put him in their truck, and they drove out to their farm. And then Cindy said, I'll show you around the farm. And Mom said, that's a good idea while I make dinner. And so Cindy took Paul and took him to the barn. This is our barn, and these are our chickens, and there were feathers, because we have chickens. There were feathers on the ground, and he thought they were so pretty, so fluffy. Look how fluffy that is. And he looked at the chickens, and then he saw the dog, and he met the dog, he met the cows. He walked all around. They had a really nice time. By the time they got back, it was time for supper. They had a really nice supper, and they showed him to his room. He had his own bedroom, And he thought, oh, I'm going to like it here. It's just so nice. The air is so fresh. There's so many trees, and it's so nice. The country is really nice, isn't it? And so they had worship, and he went to bed. The next day, they got up and had a lovely time. Cindy, his cousin, was doing homeschool. And so the auntie, Cindy's mom, taught both of them, Paul and Cindy. I can teach both of you. So they had to do their homeschool lessons in the morning. Well, pretty soon it was the Sabbath, and they got up in the morning and got ready to go to church. And they got ready, and they got in a truck, and they started driving to church. And they drove and drove and drove, and then they drove down this little road, and they stopped. And there was a young boy about Cindy's age there. And they said, get in. He said, okay. And Paul thought, who is he? His name was Swift Deer. And they picked him up every Sabbath because he wanted to go to church. His dad worked on the Meyer farm, which was real close. And so they took him to church. They did that every Sabbath. They picked him up and took him to church. Well, one day they stopped, and he was standing there, and he looked with a real sober look on his face. He said, I can't go to church with you. This is why. And then he got a big tear in his eye. He says, because some of the sheep are missing. And Mr. Meeker says that my dad is stealing them. And no one can leave the farm until they find the sheep. And so I can't go. And he says, oh, I'm so sorry. And there were a lot of mountains around there. Mountains and valleys and creeks. And the sheep can be anywhere. But he says, well, Mr. Meeker's really angry at my dad and the other helpers. And they said, oh, well, we are so sorry. And Cindy said, you know what? Maybe tomorrow we could come over and help you look for the sheep. I have a horse, and I have a horse Paul can ride, and we'll just go looking for the sheep. He said, thank you. And they said, okay, bye. And they had to go on to church without him. He walked back to the farm. Well, they were thinking, isn't that something? Sheep just missing, just have disappeared. And so the next day was Sunday, and they got up, and Cindy said, oh, we're going to go look for the sheep today. And Paul said, yeah, I can't wait. And Auntie looked at Paul, and his face was kind of flushed, kind of red, and said, Paul, I don't think you're feeling very good. She went over and felt his head. I think you have a fever. So she went and took his temperature. Yep, he had a fever. Paul, you can't go out today. You have to just take it easy. Just stay home and relax. Oh, he was so disappointed. He wanted a Wild West adventure in Montana, going on a horse looking for sheep. And here his aunt said he couldn't go. He said, I can't go. And his auntie says, sweetie, you are sick. You just need to relax here at home. Oh, he was so disappointed he didn't know what to do. But Cindy said, well, I'll be back. I told Swift Deer that I would come, and I need to go. So Paul said, okay, well, I hope you find the sheep. And he had to stay home. Poor Paul. So Cindy went out and got on her horse, because she was a real cowgirl. She knew how to take care of her horse, and she knew how to ride her horse. She knew how to take care of her horse, and off she clipped. Because the Meeker farm was right next to their farm. And she was gone all day. All day. And Paul just stayed home. He just kind of sat around, and so he started looking through the encyclopedia. And he started looking, he thought, I'm going to look up sheep, because those sheep are missing. So he looked up sheep, and he found the place in the encyclopedia where it says sheep, and he started reading all about sheep. And when Cindy came home, he says, I've been studying about sheep. And he says, what it says is that they look for water, they go to running water, and they'll follow a leader. They'll have one leader, and all the sheep follow the leader. So that's why a bunch of sheep were missing, like a whole flock just disappeared. And he said, I've been reading all about sheep. It's so interesting, Cindy. Cindy was so tired. She'd been riding all day. She says, we looked everywhere. We went up the hills, the back canyons. Swift Deer and I just went everywhere. And we could not find the sheep. She says, I don't know where they are. Well, they went to bed that night, kind of discouraged. They felt really sorry for Swift Deer and his dad and all the men because Mr. Meeker was really angry with them. He said, you stole them. That's what he said. And they didn't steal them, but they couldn't prove it. The sheep were gone. What could they say? So the next morning they woke up and Cindy said, well, we need to go looking again. And Paul said to Auntie, may I go? And Auntie looked at Paul and he was better. His face wasn't red, he wasn't sweating, she felt his head. She said, let me take your temperature. You know, those old-fashioned temperatures that you have to shake, thermometers, you have to shake and put under your tongue. He had to stay with this thermometer in his mouth. And wait, then she took it out. Oh, your temperature's normal today. Well, if it's normal, I guess you can go. Oh, he was so happy that he didn't have to stay home when Cindy was getting all this adventure looking for the sheep, and he had to stay home yesterday. He got so excited he could hardly eat his breakfast. After breakfast, they got their riding clothes on, and Paul had a horse, and Cindy had a horse, and off they clipped to the Meeker farm. And they found Swift Deer. They said, let's go. And so off they trotted. Well, we went over here yesterday because the Meeker farm is a very big farm. It was a huge ranch in Montana. And we went over here and said, let's go over here today and look for the sheep. They said, okay. So they clopped along. Well, you know what? Cindy and Paul both were praying. Please help us find the sheep because poor Swift Deer can't go to church with us. His dad Mr. Meeker's mad at his dad. It's a big problem. Please help us find the sheep. So they went over here and then Paul looked up in the sky and he saw a whole flock of sparrows flying. All of them disappeared in the side of the mountain. He said, those sparrows just disappeared in that mountain. Oh yeah, that's a cave. That's a real big cave that we have here. He thought, I wonder if the sheep could be in that cave. He says, well, I don't know. It's a small little entrance and it's really dark in there. He said, well, I think we should check that cave out. So it was getting late. So the next day, they got flashlights and they told their mom and dad, we're going to go to that cave because we think maybe the sheep might be in there because we saw all these birds fly in there. Maybe there's water in that cave. And Mom said, well, okay, but be very careful. And they took flashlights and they went over to the Meeker farm, picked up Swift Deer, and he had a whole big ball of twine. He says, I'm taking this because we're going to put it at the entrance, tie it to a stake and put it there, and then we're going to pull it out so we can find our way back because you have no idea how dark a cave is. It is pitch black and there's no light. So we can find our way back. He said, oh, that's a good idea. So they got on their horses and they trotted way up to the mountains to this big cave. And they got off and they tied their horses to some trees out there in the front. And then they put the stake in with the twine on it, and they had flashlights. And they took the twine and they started going. And the more they went in, the darker it got. Really dark. It was just a little entrance. They had to kind of duck to get in there. And they went and went and went. And it was so quiet. All they could hear is some bats fluttering on the ceiling of the cave because they had flashlights. It was disturbing the bats. So they kind of fluttered around. And they went with their flashlights. And yeah, they could see the bats. They went and they went and went. And they ran out of twine. They came to the end. So now what do we do? And they stood and listened. everything was deathly quiet. They said, well, let's put our flashlight here. So they set the flashlight on its end, shining up. And so we can see it. And let's just go a little farther. And look, there's another big room over here. So they started going into this big dark room. All of a sudden they said, stop, listen. They listened. They heard running water. They said, there's running water here. There's a creek or something. And they listened. And they said, that's why the birds come in here. They get water from the creek. And they kept going. They had their flashlights. And all of a sudden, their flashlights flashed on sheep. A whole bunch of sheep. And the sheep were looking at them. And said, the sheep, we found them. And so they had their dog along with them, their sheep dog, and they said, let's herd them out. So they got around behind them, and they says, come on, let's go. And they got the leader, and they pulled him along, and all of them followed with the sheep dog, and all of them, they herd them out. They followed the string with their flashlights way back to the entrance, and all of a sudden they could see the light coming through the entrance. And they got them back, and they walked them all the way back to Mr. Meeker's farm. And Mr. Meeker said, where did you find them? They were in the cave. There was a creek there, and the leader had gone in, maybe smelled water, to get water, and all of the others followed. Wherever he goes, we have to go. They have to follow the leader. Sheep do. They have to follow the leader. I'm afraid if the leader jumped over a cliff, they would all jump over the cliff. And he said, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And then Paul spoke up and said, you know, we prayed about it because, and I think God led us to them. And Mr. Meeker was real quiet. He didn't say anything. Well, the next Sabbath, they stopped at the Meeker farm, and there was Swift Deer ready to go. And he was happy as can be, and he jumped in. And he said, guess what? Mr. Meeker said my dad and all the other families and men could go to church. And he's giving them his truck to use to go to church. And he said, he is? And they went to church, and all of the men were at church because that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to go to church. And guess what else? Really big news. Mr. Meeker was so impressed that he came to church too. Isn't that nice? Yes. So God did answer their prayer, didn't he? They had no idea. All the men were looking for the sheep. Mr. Meeker, everyone was looking for the sheep. But the kids prayed, and God answered their prayer. I'm telling you, that is our God. That is our God. You ask him for things, and he'll say, okay, yes, good idea. I'll let you find the sheep. Isn't that a good story? I want to pray. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you so much that Paul and Cindy and Swift Deer found the sheep. Dear Lord, how many times have you found car keys for us that we lost or something else? We love you, Lord. For Jesus' sake, amen. Yes, you know, God has all knowledge. He knows everything. So if you lose something, you can ask him. He knows exactly where it is. Yeah, he knows everything. Bye! Talk to you next time.